Issues in Education continues. Here's your moderator, John Carney, on KTRS.
All right, welcome back. We are at the Missouri School Board Association annual conference at Tantera, and it seemed like a perfect time to hold the monthly Issue in Education Roundtable, brought to you by Ittner Architects. So here we are, and that's what we're doing. And we got one more segment to do, and an important one to be sure, and then we'll get on with the Carney Show. Tom O'Keefe will pop in. Early edition. Joe Holloman, by the way, taking our regular slot. He'll be on the air at 1 o'clock until 3 this afternoon. I don't do the poll. Apparently, Martin's the only one that gets to have a poll at KTRS.com, and the poll results from yesterday. The question was, which one of these K-12 issues in education is the most critical today? You sounded off. 25% said school finances. 30% said learning standards and tests. 16% voting for early childhood education. Only 25% safety and security. It would be interesting to see if that poll was conducted again today, how those numbers would move. And then, for absolutely no reason at all, people had the choice of team mascot. And it got 5%. Very important, the team mascot. That's at KTRS.com. No poll question today. As Martin is out, I'm sure it will be back on Monday. We move to safety and security and protecting those students and staff as we continue with an overview of education. And Dr. Paul Fennewald, Director of the Center for Education Safety, also a Sergeant, everybody's been a doctor, so I made you a doctor. Sergeant David Glenn, Sr., Training and Special Projects Manager for St. Louis Public Schools, dealing with security measures, and Tom Phillips, Director of Public Safety in the Blue Springs School District, joins us. And Dennis Young from Ittner has come back for more. Glutton for punishment, sir. I almost wanted to switch things up and do this first in light of what happened in Oregon yesterday. And what is even more sobering and maybe not surprising, I had read that this was the 45th shooting this year on a campus in the United States, which is just mind-boggling. And what's happened to a certain extent is I think there is some desensitivity where I don't want to say we've come to expect it, but it's certainly not as shocking, and we need to do something. What happens is something like this happens. The news covers it wall to wall for 48 hours. There's 3 days of conversation of needing to change gun control and legislation, and then we see something shiny, and we go right back to our lives, and that's how it's been. You guys are tasked with such an important part of a child's education, and as a parent, certainly I want them to be able to learn to read, I want them to be able to learn to write, but most importantly, I want them to be safe. And every school district, every school provides a different set of challenges. And we'd start with you, Paul. When you come into that and you set up policies and protocols on safety and security, is it varied wildly what you're doing in Blue Springs or what they're doing in Blue Springs as opposed to what they're doing in the city of St. Louis or out in St. Charles?
Well, I think that when you talk about safety and security, we try to take a holistic approach to it. So regardless if it's the most major metro populous school district like St. Louis or Springfield or somewhere in Kansas City, or the most rural school district where we work with in some of the rural areas of Missouri, there's some basic parameters, some basic groundwork things that every one of those school districts need to be thinking about. The basic foundation, do they have a really good, solid emergency plan? And does that plan actually engage their community first responders and some of the other stakeholders in that community that need to be a part of that plan?
You also find that oftentimes this will happen somewhere you least expect it. Obviously, you never expect it in a school, but if it's in a rough neighborhood, you're going to be less surprised that somebody got shot. This place in Oregon, little tiny sleepy town, just seems so off the radar. But I guess being tasked with security, you can't afford to look at any educational institution as outside of the danger zone. Sergeant David Glenn, talk about that, and what are some of the big challenges that you face not knowing what's a potential target?
Well, what we do in St. Louis Public Schools, is just as Paul said, we take a holistic approach. We have about 75 schools, and with our security force that we have, we do extensive training, and we try to give them the best practices and the things to look for in order to keep our students, staff, and visitors safe. So I think in the long run, whether it's a big school district or whether it's a small school district, I think you have to go at it with the same intensity.
Tom Phillips from the other side of the state in Kansas City and tasked with the security for the Blue Springs School District, and we're talking about 14,000 children. It's not something that a couple of metal detectors is going to take care of. So how do you step up your game when you got so many kids to protect?
Well, there's two aspects really to safety and security for schools. And one of them is the physical security. We're all aware of those. We lock our doors down. We have A-phone systems or buzz-in systems to let people in. We check them in through our offices now. Cameras everywhere. Those are the physical parts. And then also whoever you designate, whether it's police officers, SROs, private security, to be the physical people that are on hand to basically make sure everybody comes in. Probably the second part, though, is the most critical, and that's the emotional security. And that's where you have to have everybody buy into what you're doing. That's the whole community, not just the staff and the students, but your whole community has to buy into what you're trying to do and accomplish for safety.
I don't want to delve into this too much because then it becomes an issue of gun control. But at Umpqua, the community college where the shooting took place and 9 kids were killed, another 9 or 10 injured, there was talk at one point about arming the security guards on campus, which the former chancellor of that school said, I opted not to do that. It's one thing to be able to play Monday morning quarterback, but I would love to hear all three of your perspectives on, do you think there's a place for that, for security to have a firearm on a campus?
From my perspective at the Center for Education Safety, I think while there may be some situations in very remote rural areas where law enforcement isn't available or others on-site security, arming teachers or something like that, in rare instances, if they have the appropriate training, etc., may be acceptable. However, there's a lot of other basic due diligence things that can be done to also increase that level of security and safety. In this tragic shooting we just had yesterday, I'm not intimately familiar with, but I read news accounts where people were desperately trying to barricade their doors because they didn't have locks on the doors. And in this day and age, when we see active shooter situations where being able to barricade a door, the shooter's intent on having a body count would move on to other less hardened targets. That would just be a simple, basic due diligence. You think that every school
a master lock would cover it. Absolutely. Good point. Sarge, what do you think?
Well, we have a unique situation in St. Louis public schools. We have a total of 126 person force. And of those 126, we have 18 that are armed. And our district is broken into 3 areas, area 1, 2, and 3. And there are area supervisors who are armed. And under each of those area supervisors, we have mobile inspectors.
Is it like an air marshal that we don't know which superintendents are packing heat?
I don't know about the superintendents, but just our superintendents.
Well, you said super. I thought you meant superintendents.
No, I don't know anything about.
He's the one with the sheriff's hat.
But we have 18 that are mobile. They have cars that can respond to a situation and assist the police. And maybe they may be in that spot when something occurs. But we do firearms training annually and all the defensive tactics and all the things that we get from different police agencies. And in addition to that, we just changed, we put those safety locks on our doors where the teachers can lock the doors from the inside.
Yeah.
Don't have to come outside of the room. And all of these things are incorporated in our emergency response plan. And so it's been a really good thing. You know, we've been very fortunate because, you know, we're in the city of St. Louis with all of the crime that's taking place. We haven't had a school shooting since 1993, March of 93.
Good to hear.
And so I think we're doing something right.
Tom Phillips, same to you. Should they be armed? Are they armed?
Well, what we do, too, is a little different. And the way law enforcement trains today with active shooter and intruder drills, there's so many of us, especially in the metropolitan area of Kansas City, that train together. It would be counterproductive to arm educational staff because as we come in, we don't know who the good guy is from the bad guy.
And it's not their job.
And it's not their job.
Right.
I have 2 children myself that are educators, and they said, Dad, if I wanted to be a police officer, I would have followed your footsteps.
Yeah.
They don't want to be a police officer. They want to be an educator. So, again, when I was talking about the emotional security part is it's up to your community and what feels comfortable for them. And it's kind of a decision that whole community has to buy into and be a part of. Not just necessarily the school district on whether you arm. Paul brought up a good point. If you're in a very rural area, maybe that's where you want to look at.
Right.
Metropolitan areas like we're from, there's a lot of law enforcement going to respond quickly, so you may not want to look at that.
Dennis, hang on. I'm going to get to you in just a second,
Okay.
but one more for the three of you, and you touched upon it there for a moment, Tom, and that is the active shooter drills. And I've got a 6 and a 7-year-old, as well as some older children. And they have those in school. And I'm glad they have those in school, but I think the educator then, and even you guys, become tasked with presenting that to a child in a way that you don't fuel incredible amounts of anxiety. How do you address that?
Well, I think the most important part is you address the teachers, and because that's who the student is going to look up to for the whole year long. You've seen them when they come into the school and the teacher gives them a big hug, and that's who they're going to follow. So it's very important that the teacher is part of that plan and is a very important part of the plan, and then she can get the children to go along with it. But it is important that we don't traumatize them.
Is there a lot of interaction between you guys and the students themselves, just giving them basic tips on how to be safe?
Yeah, we do. One aspect of it, we do bullying presentations, and we also talk about de-escalation, making good choices. And we kind of tailor it for the age group because I think that if you give them some tools to give them other choices rather than be violent, it's going to help in the long run. I know back when we had we had a grant for safe free schools. I was doing the WAR program, and
right.
And it was an acronym for We Are Responsible. So we would have a collaboration with the St. Louis Police Department and as well as some of our security staff, and we would put these programs on to deter them to try to deter them.
Well, right. I know for a long time Larry King with the St. Louis Police Department was officer friendly and would travel to schools and speak to them, on their level, and that was very effective as well. Dennis Young from Ittner Architects with us. And actually forced his way in. He wasn't supposed to be on this panel, but
it's an important topic.
It's his party. As being one tasked with designing buildings, obviously you have to work around. There's going to be this many kids. We need this many classrooms. How much of security goes into the thinking when you are planning something?
Lots, because a student can't learn if they don't feel safe, and that includes bully situations and everything else. So when we design a school, we've actually involved and kind of set some guidelines for how to do it. We've had police, fire, and first responders sit down with us and critique a whole number of designs that have already been built over the years to kind of give us a learning curve. And what we learned was there's 4 layers of kind of concentric rings that we follow. One, we start on the site, and the site includes the parking lot and the playgrounds. And the parking lots are kind of tough, but there's monitors that we have. We keep landscaping away from the school, it's lit very well. And playgrounds are one that we really try to create a landscaped area and some walls that really creates kind of an impediment. Anybody that wants to can get through almost any level of security. So that's one. The second is the entries. Schools have lots of entries of how to get in. What we try to do is create one that they have to go through. And that one that they go through, we use some concepts from police stations. That's called a sally port, if you know what that is.
Sure.
You go in, and you can't go anyplace else. Two doors can't be open at the same time.
Right.
So you get buzzed into the lobby, which is the sally port. You get buzzed in if the receptionist wants you to come into the office. And the only way to get into the school is to go through the office, and then you have to get buzzed to go into the school. And it sounds like that's a lot of work, but it's really not, because once two doors get open, anybody can run through that.
How much has technology made that part of your design job easier with security, incorporating what's available with surveillance, with, stronger walls, things like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure it makes it easier. It's just one more tool to add, because as we get farther into the school, the third layer of security is the classroom, as was mentioned with door hardware. And we've had police and fire come in as we install doors and door hardware to give it a test. Take an axe, see how many minutes it takes to get through that door. If it can take over 4 minutes, we've done a pretty good job, because by then the responders are going to be there. 911, the calls, it takes a lot longer to get a response. So instead of 2.5 minutes, it's now 3.5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So we try to see if we can't preclude that intruder from getting in 4 minutes. Then it's an age-appropriate solution. So, for instance, if it's an early childhood center, we will take and create a coat closet that's in between two rooms. That room is very secured, and it's designed as a safe room. So it's not only for intruders, but it's for severe weather and tornadoes. Because young kids, it's really hard to control them. So
come by my house sometime. I can prove that.
So is any of these perfect? No, none of them are. But if you can get enough layers of security and have the staff to be a component of that design-making decision, then it's custom-tailored for them, and then they have to manage that.
Paul Fennewald, Sergeant David Glenn, Senior Tom Phillips with us talking early childhood, or talking kids, safety, security, certainly top of mind now, as it should be all the time. Thank you for keeping our kids safe. Thanks for making time for us on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So no parting gifts or anything. I'm glad to give you a copy of the home game, but we don't have one. And Dennis Young, thank you for having me. And can I be on the phone when you fire Martin and say, you know what, Carney did a much better job? Take all the time you want. Issues in Education Roundtable Discussion, a monthly broadcast brought to you on KTRS by Ittner Architects. And we moved it this time because the Missouri School Board Association's annual conference is here, so it seemed fitting to do this in this place at this time. And thank you to our hosts for that.